My name is Elise Monroe. I'm 36 years old, and I live alone in a small townhouse just outside of Pittsburgh. I work as a financial coordinator for a nonprofit hospital, the kind of job no one really notices until something goes wrong, and that's sort of been the theme of my life. Now that I think about it, unseen, until necessary. It was a Thursday morning. I remember because I was between meetings, sipping the same lukewarm coffee I always forget to finish, scrolling through Facebook out of habit more than interest. That's when I saw it. The photo. A smiling engagement shoot of my younger sister, Ava, and her fiancé Kyle. Ava in a white lace dress. Kyle in a pale blue shirt with rolled up sleeves, captioned, "Can't wait to say I do, in just 10 days. Hashtag Monroe wedding." My stomach didn't drop. It clenched a slow, tight knot of realization. I hadn't heard a word about the wedding. No invitation. No phone call. Not even a text. I sat there, rereading the caption as if it might somehow change, but it didn't. My sister was getting married. In 10 days, and I wasn't even an afterthought. I wish I could say I was surprised. But Ava has always been the golden one. The daughter who brought home beauty pageant sashes while I brought home B+ report cards and part-time job paste. I was the planner, the helper, the steady one. She was the star. Still, this felt different. Bigger, colder. Ava and I hadn't fought. We hadn't been particularly close in the last few years, but there was no falling out. No reason I could point to that would justify something this final. I refreshed the post. Already over 200 likes. Dozens of comments. I recognized names, aunts, cousins, co-workers. People congratulating her. Talking about how excited they were to attend. I wasn't tagged. Not even in the with family photos someone else had shared from the engagement party I hadn't been told about. I closed my laptop and stared at the window for a long time. I don't know how long, but by the time I moved again, my coffee had gone cold. I didn't call her. I didn't say anything to my parents. I didn't even mention it to the one friend who might have tried to comfort me with platitudes. I didn't need. I just went quiet. Because if you ask enough times why you weren't included in the plans, the photos, the stories, eventually, you realize the question isn't welcomed, and neither are you. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I watched my shows. But something inside had shifted. It wasn't just the wedding. It was what it symbolized. Years of being passed over, left out, or remembered only when convenient, all rolled into one very public exclusion. I scrolled through Ava's profile that night. All smiles, all attention. She'd blocked me from seeing some stories. I realized I couldn't view her bridal shower album, but I saw comments referencing it. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted to be there, I probably would have declined anyway, but because she'd taken the extra step to make sure I couldn't even see that it had happened. She didn't just forget me, she erased me. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept flipping through memories I hadn't thought about in years. Ava crying because she didn't get the lead role in a school play, and me giving her my allowance to buy the dress she wanted anyway. Our parents throwing her a surprise, sweet 16, while mine passed with a slice of store-bought cake after dinner. Even now, I could still hear Mom's voice, bright and proud. Ava just has that sparkle. You know, you're more of a behind-the-scenes girl. And that's important too, sweetheart. Behind the scenes. That phrase stuck to me like a label. Ava in the spotlight, and me adjusting the lights so she could shine. 3 days passed, then 5. And then, in the middle of a routine grocery run, I bumped into my mother. She didn't mention the wedding either. Just talked about weather, sales at Target, and how busy she'd been helping Ava pack for her honeymoon. She smiled the entire time. When we parted, she touched my shoulder and said, "It's nice to catch up. Elise, don't be such a stranger." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or cry, but I did none of those things. I just nodded, and walked away. Because in that moment, I knew it wasn't an oversight. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. They had decided I didn't belong. The next morning, I made coffee, sat on my small balcony, listened to birds chirping against the hum of distant traffic, and I began to think, not about the wedding, but about something else. I had spent most of my life being quiet, being the one who adjusted, who swallowed, who supported, and all it had ever earned me was a front row seat to my own erasure, But this time something was different. This time, I wasn't going to disappear. It's strange how one moment, like seeing a wedding post you weren't meant to be excluded from, can unlock years you thought you'd moved past. After that morning on the balcony, I couldn't stop remembering, not in a dramatic way, just quietly. Like certain memories were suddenly closer to the surface. As if they'd been waiting for permission to breathe. When Ava and I were younger, people always said we were so different. I never really knew what that meant until I got older and realized that different was just a softer word for preferred and invisible. She was the bubbly one. I was the practical one. She was Daddy's little girl. I was the one who reminded him of bills. I don't remember when it started. Maybe it was always like that. But by the time I was 12, I was already doing the dishes every night while Ava got to sneak out of the table early to watch TV. I learned how to pay the electric bill when I was 15 because my parents had forgotten, and I didn't want us to lose power again. No one asked me to handle it, but no one thanked me either. That was the rhythm of it. Ava shined, and I filled in the cracks so no one saw what was missing. I don't say this with bitterness. Just ... observation. At school, I was the one teachers trusted to help with the projector, collect assignments, or organize field trips. Ava was the one in the yearbook, crowned homecoming queen by junior year. At home, I got the hand-me-downs. She got the new phone because she had more friends to talk to. I got a cake, with one candle. She got a party at a venue with a rented photo booth. Even then, I didn't question it. I just adapted. One Christmas, I remember clearly I must have been 17. Ava was 14. Our parents handed her a slim box wrapped in silver foil, and I already knew it wasn't for me. She opened it and screamed, "An iPod." I'd asked for one the year before and was told we couldn't afford it. That same year, I got a planner. A pink one with kittens on the front. When I opened mine, Ava was already dancing with her earbuds in. I smiled, pretended it didn't matter. That became a skill I didn't know I was mastering. When Ava had her first breakup, I was the one who drove to towns over to pick her up from her friend's house because she was crying too hard to come home. My parents were too upset to deal with it, so I did. When I got dumped at 19 after a 3-year relationship, I didn't even get a text from anyone in the house. My mom told me, "Well, it's probably for the best. You don't want to settle too early." That was her way of showing concern. I think. After college, I moved back in for a year to save money. I cooked, cleaned, paid rent on time. Ava was still in high school and used to steal my clothes without asking. When I brought it up, my mother said, "Oh, don't be so controlling. She looks up to you." But it never felt like admiration. It felt like I was invisible. Except when I was useful. Even birthdays started to feel more like deadlines than celebrations. I once overheard my aunt ask why there was no party for my 30th. My mom laughed and said, "Elise doesn't like attention. She's a quiet one." I hadn't said that. Not once. But by then, I think they'd already written the script for who I was responsible, low maintenance, fine without fanfare. And so I became those things. Because what else could I do? I remember the exact moment I realized I'd stopped expecting anything at all. It was during Ava's college graduation. She had a white dress and heels she could barely walk in, and my dad kept shouting her name from the bleachers. They brought a bouquet of lilies and a giant glitter card that said our star. I was the one who picked up the cake, arranged the reservations, and paid the deposit for the restaurant using my card. At dinner, I was seated at the end of the table, next to my uncle who fell asleep halfway through the meal. I ate quietly while Ava opened envelopes filled with cash and praise. No one mentioned the planning, or the money, or the hours I'd spent making everything run smoothly. That night, I washed dishes in their kitchen while Ava went out with her friends to celebrate. I remember standing at the sink and thinking, this is who I am to them. The one who fills in the gaps. So when I saw that wedding post, the smiles, the countdown, the people tagged, it didn't shock me in the way you'd expect. It didn't even really surprise me. What it did was confirm something I think I'd known for a long time, but had never put into words. I was never part of the story. I was the punctuation. The background. Not someone they thought about. Just someone they expected to hold things together when the spotlight dimmed. But here's the thing about being the afterthought. You get to see things others don't. You notice Details because you've had to, because no one else ever made space for your voice. And sometimes, the ones in the background are the only ones who remember where the wires are buried. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. It didn't come with anger or even sadness. It came with clarity. It came with clarity. They'd excluded me from the wedding, just like they'd excluded me from everything that mattered. But this time, I wasn't going to shrink. This time, I wasn't going to ask why. This time, I would watch quietly, carefully, and when the moment came, I would remind them that the person they left behind wasn't sleeping. She was simply waiting. There's something dangerous about clarity. Once you finally see the pattern, you can't go back to pretending it was random. After that morning on the balcony, after the quiet decision to stop shrinking, my mind didn't just stay in the present, it kept drifting. Uninvited memories started surfacing, not loudly, but steadily, like water rising around your ankles while you're too tired to move. And what I saw, when I stopped filtering it all through guilt or excuses, was this. The wedding wasn't the betrayal. It was just the most obvious one. The most public. The one no one could pretend didn't happen. But the truth is, I'd been left off the guest list for years, just in different ways. My 25th birthday. That one stung. I'd just been promoted. My first salaried job. I was proud. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the time they showed up. Nothing huge, just a dinner together, a little recognition. Instead, Ava called me that morning to ask if I could drive her to an appointment. Her car battery had died. I said yes, because back then, I always said yes. When we got back, my parents were in the living room watching a cooking show. No one had remembered the date. I reminded them, gently. My dad blinked and said, "Oh well, you're not the type to make a fuss about birthdays." I nodded, smiled, and made myself a cup of tea. That night, Ava posted a photo of us in the car with the caption, "Me and my favorite chauffeur," and tagged me. I didn't comment. Another time, I think it was a cousin's baby shower, I offered to help set up. My aunt smiled and handed me a checklist, assuming I was on the planning committee. Turns out I wasn't even on the invitation list. Someone had assumed I was busy. That was always the reason, or the excuse. It was hard to tell the difference. After a while, even family photos started to feel like reminders of absence. Ava was always in the middle, beaming, perfectly lit. I'd be in the back, half cut off, or worse, holding someone's purse behind the camera. They called me practical, supportive, so helpful, Elise, but never essential. There was one Thanksgiving where Ava brought home a new boyfriend, Kyle, the one she's marrying. It was his first time meeting everyone. The table was set. The fancy plates were out, candles lit. When we sat down, I noticed there weren't enough place cards. There wasn't one for me. My mother said, "Oh Elise, you don't care about that kind of thing, right? You can just sit wherever." I did. At the very end of the table, near the hallway. No one passed me the wine. I poured my own. Later that night, as dishes piled up, my mother pulled me aside and whispered, "Thank you for not making that awkward. It's so much easier when you're around." Easier. That's what I was. Not loved, not celebrated, just easy. The worst part wasn't that they left me out. It was how they made me feel guilty when I noticed. Like I was ungrateful for wanting acknowledgement. Like I was selfish for needing inclusion. If I ever brought it up gently, carefully, always, careful, the response was the same. "You're overthinking it. It's not a big deal. You're just sensitive." So I stopped bringing it up, but the hurt didn't stop. It just got quieter, sharper, more precise. I used to think I was imagining it. That maybe I had some flaw I couldn't see. Something in me that made me forgettable. But now, looking back, I realize it wasn't about me being forgettable, it was about them never learning how to value someone who doesn't demand to be seen. Because I didn't cry at the table or throw fits in front of guests. They mistook my silence for contentment. But silence isn't peace, it's just the absence of permission. And for most of my life, I had waited for permission to be included. As if inclusion was a prize I hadn't yet earned. When I was 16, Ava broke a lamp and blamed it on me. My parents believed her without question. I paid for it with my part-time paycheck. A few years later, she borrowed my black dress without asking and returned it stained with wine. She laughed and said, "It was a cheap one anyway, right?" I nodded, even in my 30s, when I got laid off during a round of budget cuts. No one called to check in, but when Ava got food poisoning once, my mother group texted the entire extended family to keep them updated on her progress like she was recovering from major surgery. So yes, the wedding was hurtful, but the real betrayal was how long I'd been conditioned not to call anything a betrayal, to smile while being overlooked, to congratulate her even when I was grieving something quietly, to keep showing up for people who wouldn't have noticed if I stopped. That realization didn't come with fireworks, just a cold, steady understanding, and it didn't make me bitter, it made me observant. There's a kind of clarity that settles into you like muscle memory, and once you feel it, you start paying attention in a different way to what people post, to what they don't say, to who's watching and who's pretending not to. I scrolled through Ava's page again one night and noticed she'd blocked me from several story highlights. Bridal shower, bachelorette weekend, dress shopping. It wasn't an oversight, it was a curated exclusion. That was the part that got to me. She didn't just leave me out, she wanted to make sure. I never saw how much she didn't want me there. I could have called her, I could have asked why. I could have made it messy, but I didn't, because I finally understood something no one had ever told me. The most powerful thing I could do was not beg for a seat, it was to learn how to build my own table, and wait for the day they realized what they lost, and that day was coming. I didn't know how yet, but I was done pretending I didn't notice, done pretending I was okay. After years of brushing things off, it should have been easy to do it one more time, but something was different now, not louder, not angrier, just clearer. It's like the switch that had always kept me in accept mode, quietly flipped, and once it did, I started seeing everything through a sharper lens. Not just the wedding, not just Ava, but all of them. How they moved, how they talked, what they shared, and what they carefully didn't. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't ask questions. I just watched, and they never noticed, because people like me, the ones who adapt, accommodate, adjust, are never seen as a threat. We're seen as background noise, safe, predictable. They didn't realize that when someone stops speaking, they often start paying attention, and I was. The first thing I noticed was how Ava talked about Kyle online. Endless captions, carefully posed photos, hashtags about true love and fairy tales. But when I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner, the first time I met him, there was a weird tension I hadn't registered before. He was polite, but stiff, overly polished. The kind of man who says the right things too quickly and watches people when they're not looking. He'd asked me a few questions that night, where I worked, if I owned or rented, whether I ever wanted to leave Pittsburgh. I thought it was small talk, but now it struck me as calculated. Later that evening, he'd gotten into a small argument with Ava. Nothing big, just a short whisper fight in the kitchen about a drink she spilled. But his tone was sharp, clipped, not performative, real. And when I think back, I remember something in her eyes when she came out, something brittle. She smiled too fast, too wide. Back then, I ignored it. Now I filed it away. That week, I started collecting pieces, not dramatically, not like a movie, just quietly, methodically, the same way I used to budget the household groceries when I was 16 and no one else would. I went through Ava's social media accounts, not just the main ones, but the old ones. Tumblr, Pinterest, boards, Twitter. Things she probably forgot were still public. There was a post from 2 years ago, a cryptic tweet that read, "When someone shows you who they are, listen the first time." That stuck with me. It was posted at 2:14 a.m., no likes, no replies, no context, just a single, sleepless sentence. There were others too, subtle offhand jokes about dodging red flags and people not being who they seem. Things you only notice when you're looking for them. I didn't go down a rabbit hole, I wasn't obsessed, but I was awake, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to be helpful. I wasn't trying to earn their kindness. I was simply watching, listening, letting the silence speak. And in that stillness, I realized how much I'd missed before, not because I was blind, but because I was always too busy explaining things away. This time, I didn't explain. I gathered, then came the email. A forward from a former classmate, someone who used to work at the same company Ava now worked for. Thought you might find this interesting. The subject line said. Inside was a short email thread. Screenshots. Apparently, Kyle had been in HR trouble at his last job, a quiet internal investigation over inappropriate boundaries with a junior associate. No legal action. Nothing, on the record, but he left abruptly, with a glowing recommendation letter, which now felt suspiciously generous. The associate had posted anonymously on a forum about the experience. Ava's name came up once in a comment, months later, saying she probably doesn't even know. I read that line 3 times, then I saved it. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about truth, about how many times I'd let things slide because I thought silence was more noble than confrontation, about how many birthdays, milestones, and memories I'd swallowed without complaint. And now, here was one piece of real, actual weight. Not opinion. Not hurt feelings. A fact. Something they didn't know I knew. And that changed everything. I started keeping a folder. Just one. Unlabeled. Not to hurt anyone. Not to use as ammunition. Just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't imagining it. That something was off and had been for a while. That I wasn't bitter. I was observant, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to play the part of the good sister, who protects everyone else's comfort before her own peace. I was going to be still, and when the moment came, I'd know. A few days later, my mom texted me for the first time in weeks. A cheerful message. Don't forget Ava's wedding is this Saturday. So exciting. I stared at it for a long time. There was no invite, no location, no details, just the assumption that I would cheer from the sidelines. Like always. I didn't reply. She sent a follow-up the next morning. Hope you're not upset. It's just that things got limited and Kyle's side of the family had a lot of RSVPs. Then, a third. We know you understand. You're always so good about these things. There it was again. The praise that sounds like dismissal. You're so good about these things. That night, I opened my folder again, scrolled through what I'd collected. No grand evidence. No smoking gun, but enough to make someone pause. Enough to make someone ask questions. Enough to shake something, quietly without needing to raise my voice. I closed the folder, and for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly, not because I had a plan, but because I finally had my power, and I wasn't giving it back. The folder stayed closed for a few days, not because I lost interest, but because I knew I couldn't approach this the way I used to handle things. I didn't want to rush into action just to soothe the part of me that still flinched at being left out. I wanted to be sure, not just about what I knew, but about why it mattered, and how to use it. I started checking small things. Quiet things. Kyle had a LinkedIn page, curated and glossy, like everything else he touched. I noted the job titles, the glowing endorsements, the clean timeline, except something didn't line up. He listed himself as working at West Zone Logistics until March of the previous year, but a few posts from former employees hinted that he'd actually left in January, and that he wasn't the only one quietly let go that quarter. There was no official news about it. No article, no blog post. Just whispers. A thread on an old employee forum hinted at some HR shakeup. Someone mentioned an internal dispute with a supervisor. Another mentioned a conflict of interest with a vendor contract. Then silence. It felt carefully cleaned up, like someone had swept it away before anyone could ask questions. But the timing stayed in my head, because March was around the time Ava had posted that cryptic message, the one about listening when people show you who they are. And I remembered something else too. Ava had briefly moved back into our parents' house around then. She'd said it was just to save for a condo. But I remember seeing her in sweatpants for 3 weeks straight. She never smiled in those months. And she stopped posting selfies. Altogether, now it clicked. She wasn't saving, she was recovering. I didn't know the full story. I still don't, but I knew this. Whatever happened at Kyle's old job, whatever had shaken Ava so badly, no one was talking about it. Not online, not at home, not even between them. That kind of silence isn't natural. It's controlled, and, if I had to guess, Kyle had made sure of it. I thought about confronting her, not out of spite, but out of concern. A part of me still remembered being the big sister, the one who used to hide in the bathroom with her, when she was scared of storms. But I didn't reach out. Because I'd already tried to protect her before. And it only made me invisible. This time, I wasn't going to interfere. I was going to watch and wait because I knew something they didn't, and that changed everything. The wedding was 6 days away. I still hadn't received an invitation. No address, no itinerary, no mention of whether it would be outdoors, indoors, church, or courthouse. Nothing, but I knew the venue. I figured it out from a hashtag someone posted in a comment. An old college friend of Ava's had tagged herself at a place called Foxdale Grove. It was subtle, probably a mistake, but I saw it. Foxdale Grove was a popular rustic-style venue 2 towns over. Private property. Secluded, expensive. The kind of place you only book when you care about who's watching. I smiled. They didn't think I knew. They didn't think I was paying attention. And that gave me freedom. In the days leading up to the wedding, I started noticing a pattern. Every post from Ava was cheerful, but carefully so. Almost like she was trying to convince herself more than her audience. She was still tagging Kyle, still calling him my person and my safe space, but the comments felt thinner, more level. The excitement didn't feel real. My mom, meanwhile, was in full event dash mode. She posted about her beautiful baby girl getting married. There was a long caption about how proud she was of Ava's journey. There was no mention of me, not even a hint. I'd been fully cropped out of the story. But they forgot something important. I wasn't the type to yell. I wasn't the type to storm in and cause a scene. I was the type to wait until the silence grew teeth. The night before the wedding, I stayed up later than usual. I opened the folder again, reviewed what I had. I still didn't have a full picture, but I didn't need one. I had enough to raise a question, and questions, in the right moment, are more powerful than answers. I drafted a message. Short, respectful, clear, no threats, no anger, just facts, and 2 screenshots. One of Kyle's HR controversy. The other of Ava's vague but telling message from last year. Then I scheduled it to send. Not right away, but exactly 55 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin. Enough time to be read, not enough time to hide it. I addressed it to one person. Not Ava, not Kyle, but the venue coordinator. Her public email was listed on the website. I copied my mother on the message. I didn't include a subject line. I wanted them to open it on instinct, and they would. Then I closed my laptop, made some tea, and sat quietly by the window. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to be part of the celebration. I was simply choosing my moment. Because I'd finally learned something. Silence is not weakness, it's waiting, it's knowing exactly when to speak, and what to say. And sometimes, the guest you forgot to mention is the one who doesn't need an invitation to be remembered. The morning of the wedding arrived quiet. There were no storms, no ominous signs. Just blue skies, the usual traffic hum outside my window, and the sound of my kettle boiling. I got up early, even though I hadn't set an alarm. I didn't need one. My body knew, this was the day, not for me. Not in the way they'd planned, but it was still my day in its own way. I poured my tea, sat down with my laptop, and opened the email draft I'd written 4 days earlier. It was short, just a few lines. No dramatic flair. No bitter edge. Just the truth carefully arranged and calmly presented. I had included the timeline from Kyle's last known employment. A quiet departure, 2 conflicting explanations. I included the anonymous thread from the professional forum, where someone described a man matching Kyle's profile, involved in a non-reported HR issue. I included the screenshot of Ava's cryptic message from that same month when someone shows you who they are. Listen the first time, and I added one final detail, not a threat, just a reflection. No one deserves to walk into a marriage with unanswered questions, especially not someone you claim to love. That line wasn't for Kyle, it wasn't for my mother, it was for Ava, whether she read it now, or years from now. I didn't CC the world, just 3 people. The venue coordinator, who would be receiving guests and managing timing. My mother, who would no doubt be running the emotional logistics, and Ava's maid of honor, a friend I'd met once, briefly, at a cousin's barbecue. She had looked at me then like she knew I wasn't just the quiet older sister. She hadn't said anything, but she'd seen enough. I figured she'd open it, or at least show it to Ava. Either way, it would land. I double-checked the time. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. I scheduled the email for 3:15 p.m., late enough that everyone would already be dressed, in position, and nervous, early enough that it would still matter. I clicked schedule, send. And then I closed my laptop. The thing about revenge, the kind that actually works, is that it doesn't need to be explosive, it just needs to be felt. Not immediately, not always, all at once. Sometimes the quietest gestures create the deepest ripples. At 3:17 p.m. my phone buzzed, one notification. Email opened first by the venue coordinator. Then again, seconds later, by my mother. No replies, no calls, just the quiet alert that they'd read it. I turned my phone face down and went to make more tea. Because this wasn't about gloating, it was about balance, it was about finally placing weight on the side of the scale that had always been empty for me. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. That was the point. I wasn't trying to control it. I wasn't trying to ruin her day. I was giving her a moment she'd never been given before. A moment to pause, to think, to ask the question that no one in our family had ever dared to ask out loud. What if Elise saw something the rest of us didn't? The silence stretched through the rest of the afternoon. No messages, no follow-ups. I expected that if they were going to respond, it would be days later, if ever. But silence tells its own story. I imagined the scene playing out quietly. My mother was checking her phone in the front row, her smile fading just a bit. The maid of honor glances at Ava, whispering something in her ear just before the music starts. Ava looked toward the venue doors, suddenly unsure who might walk in, and Kyle, adjusting his cufflinks, sensing the shift in the room, not knowing why. I didn't have to be there. I already was. That night, I didn't check for photos. I didn't scroll through hashtags. I didn't text anyone to ask how it went. I simply stayed home, read a book, ate dinner, let the day pass through me like wind, because I had already done what I came to do. Some people need applause to know they've done something powerful. I only needed one truth. They would never forget that email, even if they never spoke of it, especially if they never spoke of it the next morning. I woke up to a message, not from Ava, from the maid of honor. Just 3 words. You were right, nothing else, no details, no questions, no drama. But I knew what that meant, and more importantly, I knew she meant it. A few hours later, my mother called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her tone tight and polite. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Call when you can. That was new. She didn't call to accuse. She didn't call to demand. She called because she didn't know what I knew. And that uncertainty, that unfamiliar power shift, it changed something. Not for them, for me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten sister. I felt like the one who finally spoke, without yelling, without begging, without even needing to be there. Just one message perfectly timed was enough to remind them. You can only erase someone until they learn to write themselves back in, and I had quietly completely. I didn't ask for confirmation, didn't chase it, didn't need it, but sometimes, the silence that follows an uncomfortable truth says more than any reply ever could. The morning after the wedding, I went about my usual routine, coffee, laundry, a few emails for work. I let the stillness settle, uninterrupted by noon. Though, it started quietly. First was a post from one of Ava's college friends. A blurry photo of the venue's garden setup, half decorated, half empty. The caption just read, "Wow. Today was something." No emojis, no follow-ups. Then came a tag I wasn't supposed to see. Someone had commented on the same photo. Wait, what happened? I thought the ceremony was at 4. Another reply came in, then was quickly deleted. That was the moment I knew. They didn't go through with it. The next clue came from my aunt. She always overposted when she was anxious. This time, it was an awkward boomerang of her mimosa and a caption that felt like it was trying too hard. Sometimes, life gives you surprises, but family keeps you grounded. It was meant to look like resilience. But all I saw was panic wrapped in passive cheer. I didn't like it. I just watched and waited around. 3 p.m. I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin I barely knew, who lived across the country. She asked one simple question. Hey, were you at the wedding? I responded honestly. No. She replied with a single line. Yeah, figured. No emoji, no further context. Just that. A thin line of acknowledgement stretching across the distance, without needing to say the thing directly. That was the thread running through the entire day. Everyone is trying not to say it, and everyone absolutely knows. No one called me, not my mother, not Ava, not anyone from the family. It was like they all silently agreed not to mention it because naming it meant admitting what happened, and admitting what happened meant admitting I had a reason, and that would be too much for them. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt resolved, the kind of quiet that comes not after revenge, but after long-awaited balance. I didn't stop anything out of spite. I just placed a stone in the water and let the ripples travel where they were meant to go, and now the ripples were reaching the shoreline. The next day, I heard from the maid of honor again. A short message. She's not speaking to anyone, right? Now. I asked nothing. Said nothing. But she followed up after a pause. She cried. A lot. Not because of you. Because she already knew. Just didn't want it to be real. I sat with that for a while. Because that was the part that always broke me before seeing Ava in pain. And stepping in to protect her. But this time, I didn't, because this wasn't about pain, this was about the truth, and if it took falling apart in front of the wrong people to finally look in the mirror, then maybe that was a kind of beginning. Not an end. By midweek, the story started to leak quietly, through people who had no obligation to keep it quiet. Someone from the groom's side mentioned a misunderstanding. Another said there were legal concerns with the venue that delayed things, but every explanation was vague, defensive, fragile. No one ever said my name, but I didn't need them to, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the reason the story changed, and they all knew it. Ava didn't post for 3 days. Then she uploaded a black and white photo of a coastline, no faces, no people. The caption read, "Sometimes peace comes after everything falls apart." No tags, no comments enabled. I stared at that post longer than I thought I would. Not because I felt guilty, but because for the first time, her words didn't feel curated. They felt real. It's a strange thing, knowing your absence left a mark louder than any presence ever did. But that's what happens when people push someone too far, for too long, and expect them to keep holding the weight in silence. They forget that silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is a strategy, and eventually, silence becomes action. I didn't want Ava humiliated. I didn't want my mother to be punished. What I wanted was to no longer be the one cleaning up after everyone else's messes, while they celebrated without me, and now, they finally had to sit in their own discomfort, not mine. By the end of the week there were no wedding photos, no tagged vendors, no public thank yous, no Mr. and Mrs. Byrne announcements. The wedding had vanished, not postponed, not rescheduled, just gone, and still. No one said my name. But I could feel the shift in how they thought of me, not in fear, in caution, because they finally understood. I wasn't the one they could overlook anymore. I was the one who had been watching all along. A week passed, then another. No apology came. Not from Ava, not from my mother, not from anyone. And strangely, I didn't need one, because for the first time, the silence wasn't something done to me. It was mine, and it was full of meaning. I used to think closure came in words. That someone had to say, "You were right," or "I'm sorry I didn't see you," for it to count. But I've learned something different. Closure isn't always granted. Sometimes, it's claimed quietly, on your own terms. And mine came not in their voices, but in their pause, after the wedding that never happened. I stayed completely silent. No posts, no messages, no reaction. I just let the air around it settle. And it did awkwardly, unevenly, like the dust after something heavy falls in a room where no one admits they heard the crash. I know they talked. I know my name came up behind closed doors. But no one said it to my face. No one even tried. And in that absence, I found a kind of clarity I had never known I needed. I'd spent most of my life being the one who absorbed everyone else's tension. I smoothed over family awkwardness. I kept secrets that I was never thanked for. I stood in the wings while other people took the stage, and I was told it was noble, that it was love. But love doesn't erase you. Love doesn't hand out chairs and forget to include yours at the table. And now, I was done asking for a seat. One afternoon, I ran into an old coworker at the pharmacy. She asked how my sister's wedding went. I smiled and simply said, there wasn't one. She blinked, caught off guard, but didn't press, just nodded and said, sometimes that's for the best. It was a small moment, but it felt huge. Because the truth wasn't heavy anymore, it was just there. I didn't flinch when I said it. I didn't explain. I didn't have to. I did hear from Ava eventually, sort of 2.5 weeks later. She sent me a message, not an apology, not even a question, just a line that read, I know you did what you thought was right. That, was it no punctuation? No warmth, but I stared at it longer than I expected. Because in her way, it was the closest she'd ever come to saying she saw me. Not for who she wanted me to be, not for what I could do for her, but for what I finally did. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. Some doors don't need slamming. Some just close. Soft and final. A few days later, I took down the folder I'd kept. The one with the screenshots, the notes, the timeline. I deleted it. Not because I regretted anything, but because I didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. I had found my voice, not through confrontation, not through volume, but through intention. And once I spoke in that way, even once, I never needed to speak the same way again. I've learned that you don't always get justice in the form you expect. Sometimes it's not a confession, not an apology, not even a recognition. Sometimes it's just a shift in gravity, a change in how people look at you when they realize you saw more than they thought, and you acted on it, not out of spite, but because you finally decided your silence had run its course. People still talk about Ava in the family, though less now. There are murmurs that she needed time, that she's working on herself. I hope that's true. Not because I want her approval, I don't, but because I know what it's like to live in someone else's version of you for too long. It's a lonely place to be, and if she's finally stepping out of that, then maybe something good came from the wreckage. As for me, I still live in the same house, still drink the same tea, still working the same job, but something is different, not visible, but real. I carry myself differently now, not because anything outside me changed, but because I did, and the peace that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, earned. Mine. I don't know if they'll ever truly understand what happened, or why. But that's no longer my job. I'm not here to explain, I'm here to live. And if they ever wonder why the wedding unraveled, why the moment cracked in silence, they already know. They just won't say it. But they don't have to, because I said it once, with just one message, and it was enough.